Hello world, welcome to the Game Psychiatrist. I'm the Game Psychiatrist. Thanks for joining, and special thanks right off the bat to a great new addition to the channel, follower Mango Ice Cream 30. You sound delicious. Thank you for the follow. I'm really looking forward to talking tonight about OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. My idea for tonight was talking. So I know what everyone wants to do on a Friday night is go through slides. But these slides are fashionable, I promise. I tried to use as few words as possible on the slides. I think that's always a good thing. And so I'm hoping to, give like a really great primer to what OCD is and OCD isn't. Maybe generate some conversation if there's some lively people in the chat. And there's a song I want to discuss. It's kind of like a hit song on the alternative rock charts right now, which I think is a really, really great I think it's actually a really great, really meaningful explanation of OCD and what the artist's like experience of OCD is, as well as a couple of YouTube videos, including a pretty famous YouTube vlog brother. So without further ado, I think we might get started. So we're talking about OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. This is one of many disorders that are listed in the DSM-5. I'm like looking around me for it. Here it is. The DSM-5, which is kind of like the diagnostic manual, diagnostic Bible, if you will, for people in behavioral health. It ends up being part of coding. Diagnosis ends up being like a really important part of our like medical system. And proper diagnosis can really help people get connected to the right treatment, whether it's medicine or therapy, a particular kind of therapy, or some other kind of intervention. OCD. So OCD is characterized by having recurrent obsessions, sometimes you can have OCD that is just obsessions. Sometimes you can have OCD that is just compulsions, although generally it's both obsessions and compulsions. And they interfere with daily functioning a lot. In the DSM, it's kind of like a prerequisite, like a defining factor of all disorders, that they cause a lack of order, that they cause difficulties making friendships, keeping your friendships and other relationships, completing your schoolwork, completing your work, staying out of jail, staying out of other kinds of trouble. Those are all important parts of being in order. So you're in disorder if you're kind of chronically having a pattern of having all those kind of issues. So again, OCD is those recurrent obsessions and compulsions that interfere with your daily functioning a lot, to the point that it's a disorder. The OCD, the obsessions and compulsions, might take a lot of time, or might affect those things I mentioned before. So definitions, I think, are really important. Obsession. What exactly is an obsession? When people say obsession, they think of a lot of different things. They think maybe a person's got a crush on someone else, and they just kind of think about them all the time. Or when they're in the same room as that person, they kind of like stare at them, look at them like all the time. They might call that like an obsession. Someone might be a fan of a sports team, and they just think about the New York Yankees like all day long, and they are reading New York Yankees articles all day long, and they love the Yankees. They're checking the score every night, and then they go home and all they can talk about is the New York Yankees. They might call themselves obsessed. And then other people, they might just use the word obsession to say that they really like something. Like I'm obsessed with mango ice cream. Not you. You just start following me. Don't be scared. But like actual mango ice cream, someone might go to an ice cream parlor and be like, "Oh, I'm obsessed with mango ice cream," because they really like it a lot. And so that's not what we're talking about here. When we're talking about obsessions in OCD, we're talking about unwanted, intrusive thoughts, urges, and images that like pop into your mind. We're going to go into like greater detail about that in just a second. These are like thoughts, urges, and images that the person does not want. Like they do not want to be thinking about these things. This isn't the ice cream that they want to be thinking about. This isn't the cute guy or girl or other person that they want to be thinking about. These aren't images of like pleasant things coming in their mind. These aren't mind vacation kind of thoughts. These are unwanted, intrusive thoughts. They won't go away. They cause a lot of worry or stress. And some examples, we'll go through like fuller examples in just a little bit. But some examples might be germs. Some people obsess about germs, wondering, okay, is this thing dirty? Is this part of the table dirty? Is the floor dirty? How am I going to wash my feet? How am I going to wash my shoes? How am I going to wash my hands after I wash my shoes? And then, obsessing, worrying about these things to a great extent. Germs or contamination end up being a common theme for a lot of folks with obsessions and OCD. And then violence ends up being a particularly troubling obsession. A person who might be perfectly friendly, perfectly kind, has never actually hurt a person in their life, might still have really, really painful, difficult, frustrating thoughts and images that just pop into their mind out of nowhere. This might be a sign of OCD. And then the C in OCD stands for compulsions. So compulsions are repeating or they're repeating behaviors or mind routines a person feels driven to do. We'll have a more extensive list, in fact, an inventory later of possible compulsions that are really seen frequently in OCD. But some examples might be hand washing. A person, when stressed out with OCD, might feel a really strong urge to go to the sink and just wash their hands, despite the fact that they didn't just come in from outside, they didn't touch anything particularly dirty, they didn't just finish handling chicken. They just get this urge to wash their hands, and so they go to the sink and they start washing their hands. Sometimes over and over and over again, sometimes for hours, sometimes to the point that their skin gets raw, sometimes to the point that they get skin infections otherwise. That's, maybe the most severe kind of example of a hand washing compulsion. And then in terms of a mind routine, some folks with OCD do mind routines or mind rituals where maybe in their mind, they might just be sitting there kind of minding their own business, waiting for a class to start or waiting for some meeting to start. And just in their mind, they're sitting there just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or counting off multiples, thinking 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, and just going and going and going in their mind for no particular reason other than to probably, consciously, maybe subconsciously, relieve some kind of stress or pressure that they're experiencing. So the Y box, what the Y box is, it's the Yale Brown obsessive compulsive. What's the S stand for? I think it's symptom. Yeah, maybe it's a symptom inventory. That's what it is. It's an OCD symptom inventory developed in a joint research from Yale University, Brown University. And what they've done is they've created a symptom inventory that ends up being commonly used by your social workers, your psychotherapists, your psychiatrists in trying to diagnose, does this person have OCD or do they not have OCD? And so here, I know it's really, really small. I apologize for that. But this is also something you can look up yourself. If you were to Google Y box, YB, OCS, I think it would be the first link that would pop up. This is public domain stuff. Great that they're sharing it. But it's a list of commonly held obsessions and compulsions that folks might have in OCD. I'm going to pull up my larger copy here and read through it for the viewers. And so on the Y box symptom checklist, it starts with obsessions and obsessions that they categorize as aggressive obsessions. So aggressive obsessions are ones that kind of suggest something dangerous. They might be obsessions, intrusive thoughts about a person being afraid of hurting themselves, of a person being afraid they might hurt someone else, other just random violent or horrific images. A person might obsess being afraid that they might do something embarrassing or blurt out obscenities or insults. For example, someone with Tourette syndrome, Tourette's disorder, which is highly comorbid with OCD, actually. Most folks who have Tourette's will also have OCD. So for you Sweet Anita fans out there, this is, one of those obsessions that we're talking about. Some folks have fears that they might steal things. They might be afraid that they'll harm other people accidentally if they're not careful enough. They They might also, be afraid that they'll be responsible for something else terrible happening, like a fire happening or someone being robbed. An example that I've seen in my clinical practice is I remember treating, it was actually a pretty interesting case because it was a girl who was so young. As we'll talk about in just a little bit, the typical trajectory is that most boys, birth sex males with OCD will be be diagnosed with OCD in their teenage. And then most girls will actually be diagnosed for the first time a bit later, like in their later teens or maybe even close to their 20s. But this one case that I'm remembering was a girl, she was 11, so really, really young, a really like kind girl, someone who her mother, her teacher said that, she followed the rules all the time, really tried not to be in trouble at any point in time, had never like really hurt anyone, had never hurt a fly, that kind of person. And so she had this severe anxiety, and in talking to her, I got the sense that she had a lot of obsessive tendencies. And for her, the obsession, the intrusive image that would pop into her mind was after school in particular. She'd be sitting there. They had like some kind of like kitchen island in their kitchen. And so she'd be sitting there and she'd be like working on some homework. And her mom would like be on the other side of the counter with the cutting board with a knife, like cutting up vegetables for dinner. And so this girl, despite, how nonviolent a person she was, that she'd never hurt anyone before, that she loved her mother very much. In fact, she considered her mother to be her favorite parent. This girl would sit there, and as much as she tried to concentrate on her homework, she could not do it because she just kept on having this image coming into her mind of her stabbing her mother. Or if not stabbing her mother, she kept on sitting there and imagining herself pushing her arms out and like hitting the cutting board in such a way that her mom might drop the knife, or it might push the knife like into her mom's chest and like kill her mom. And so this poor sweet girl would like sit there trying to do her homework, but all her mind could think about was a knife being driven into her mother's chest and then seeing her mother like bleed on the kitchen floor, which is a terribly, terribly distressing thing to think about. I would expect most people to be like terrified, horrified that they're having this kind of thought, especially since, she had all these warm feelings for her mom. She loved her mom as her favorite parent. And of course, all she wanted to do was like sit there and get her homework done. So this was terribly distressing for her. And this ends up being like a really important point of OCD. Again, those thoughts, those images, those urges, they are ego dystonic. The people don't want to be having those thoughts at all. Moving on through the inventory. In addition to those aggressive type obsessions, there are contamination obsessions, like I mentioned before. Worry about or feeling disgusted to an excessive extent by things like urine, feces, spit, spending a lot of time worrying about dirt and germs, whether things are dirty, whether things are infected. Of course, this is a concern that a lot of people have had. I would have to say, like in a normal way, during the coronavirus pandemic, of course, people were scared, like, okay, is there coronavirus in the air? If I go inside in a crowded place and people aren't wearing masks, is there going to be coronavirus there in the air? Can I breathe the air? People walking in public spaces, if I touch that handle, if I touch that, rail, like, am I going to contacts? That can make a lot of sense. But it can also be taken to such a severe extent that it's really intrusive and really unwanted. Other contamination worries. Oh, hey Lee, thanks for joining. This might be, forgive me, this might be the driest part of the presentation. We're just talking about the kinds of obsessions, kinds of compulsions people might have in OCD. Other types of contamination obsessions might be being really worried about animals, especially bugs, being really worried about like household cleaners. I've had one patient who was actually afraid of like walking toward the sink because underneath the sink there was like Lysol and like Clorox and stuff, and they were afraid that if they got too close that somehow they could be poisoned by those things. Some people with contamination obsessions might be bothered by sticky substances or residues. They might be worried that they'll get sick or they'll get other people sick by spreading contamination somehow. These are all examples of contamination obsessions. So far we've got aggressive obsessions people might have, contamination obsessions people might have. Sexual obsessions are a thing that I would say I've been surprised like how frequently people have the sexual obsessions, and they're really, really afraid to talk about it because they feel kind of like embarrassed by it. Some people with OCD, in addition to these kind of obsessions, and of course, being a child psychiatrist, like I've worked with a lot of teenagers, it's a pretty like sexually stormy kind of time. People are figuring themselves out. People have, I think that the common phrase is raging hormones, all kinds of urges, with or without, pent up sexuality and confused thoughts and feelings of sexuality based off their morality or their culture, their family. But sexual obsessions typically go to like a different level. I would say a level that if Lee, have you seen Superbad? I imagine you've seen Superbad. I forget which character it is. It was the larger habitus star of Superbad. He ended up sitting down as a young kid and like drawing penises like all day long. Do you remember this part? Lee, please tell me you remember this part. Otherwise, I'm just talking about some kid drawing penises. But in the movie Superbad, this kid just had notebooks. Like he couldn't pay attention to class. He couldn't pay attention to anything because he's just drawing dicks in his notebook. That might be an example of a sexual obsession. I've had patients before who, despite the fact they were really, really, really terribly bothered by this when they were at school, anytime they saw adults in particular, the only thing they could imagine was the adults like having sex. So like anytime they're in the cafeteria and there were like grown-ups proctoring lunchtime, she actually like couldn't eat because all she could do was like sit there and like try to fight her mind as her mind just kept on imagining. I guess that's supposed to be sex. Her mind just kept on imagining all her teachers, all the janitors, all the lunch people just like going at it. And she was like terrified, mortified. She thought it was disgusting, but all she could see in her mind was these people having sex. And of course, she thought that they're old and disgusting type people. She did not think they were attractive. This was not like some part of it, as far as I could tell, some part of like sexual fantasy that was giving her any level of gratification. She was terrified that she was just imagining the gym teacher and the lunch lady just like having sex and doing terrible things. She could not get it out of her mind. So some people have sexual obsessions like that. It can involve illegal activities. It can involve thoughts about sex that doesn't align with their own sexual orientation. Then that kind of like gets wrapped up into if they have any kind of homophobic thoughts, that can be hard. And then some people can also have sexual obsessions that are aggressive type. For example, the idea of sexually assaulting someone, forcing themselves on another person. That can be another type of sexual obsession. Some people with OCD, I think a lot of people out there know about this. They might have hoarding or saving obsessions. Actually, you can see it either way in OCD. There are some people who don't want to give up anything just in case it's useful, or sometimes they can't even explain why they want to keep it. They just do. And then there's also some people who can't stand to have like trash, people who can't stand to have things out of order in their space. They can't stand to have any excess anywhere. So you might see that too. And that might align more closely with the next category, the obsession with the need for symmetry or exactness. Some people, it's really, really important to them that all their circles be perfect, that they're, every shape that they draw, it's perfectly symmetrical. Every face that they draw, it's perfectly symmetrical. Sometimes that thought by itself might cause a lot of distress, but other times people with OCD might think, okay, if I don't draw this line perfectly straight, someone's going to get hurt. It kind of reminds me of, I think there's like a little kids thing to say, like walking down the street, kids might like jump over cracks and stuff. And there's like some kind of like rhyme that's like, step on a crack, break your mother's back. That's like a perfect example of an obsessive, magical type thought that someone with OCD might have. And then other than that, there are like other obsessions where people might worry just endlessly about knowing things, knowing everything, remembering things. They might be afraid of saying certain things or of not saying things, saying the right thing or saying something exactly the right way. People might obsess about certain noises and sounds. They might have really strong beliefs about lucky and unlucky numbers, lucky and unlucky colors. They might have a lot of superstitious type fears. Ooh, I see. I got something. A question from Mango. Thanks again for joining. Thanks for the follow. Question from Mango Ice Cream is it possible someone can be obsessed over females? Because I have an obsession over certain things. For example, I have a hobby of taking pictures of buses and trucks. Instead of taking one photo of the bus, I'll take like 23 photos of the same bus. Okay. I think, and of course, this is not like a psychiatric evaluation or anything like this. But I realize, reading what you've written here, it has me thinking about a few things, Mango. I wonder if it stresses you out at all or causes you any kind of problem taking so many pictures of the buses or trucks. I guess this is trying to parse out whether something is ego dystonic, like in OCD, or ego syntonic. Like this is actually a thing that's like important to you, that you're like into and maybe feels good to you in some kind of way. I can imagine someone having a hobby of taking pictures of buses or trucks, and it being like extremely artistic, being like really great stuff. I don't know if this is something you do professionally or if you keep like a social media, if this is some kind of job or maybe something that you've made like friends over. It could very well be that taking 23 photos of the same bus is just like part of the art. Yeah, just for fun. I would wonder, like, have you ever been late for school or late for work or gotten in some kind of trouble because you took 23 photos of the same bus? I would wonder, how long does it take to take the 23 photos of the same bus? Because, if you put like continuous mode on your phone or your camera, and you might take like 23 pictures in like 10 seconds. And it might be like minimally intrusive. So I'd be interested, the stuff with the buses, the stuff with the trucks, the thoughts about females. I wonder if it's caused you like any trouble at any point in time. This is like a really important idea for any, mental health or behavioral health disorder, is that whatever you're experiencing, you're thinking, you're feeling, or you're doing, it needs to be disordered in the sense that it's causing you a significant problem in order for it to be a diagnosis. In terms of the thoughts about females, of course, I think there are a lot of people, probably hundreds of millions of people, who could probably be classified as being obsessed over females in some way, shape, or form. Of course, there's people have sexual interest. Some people have sexual interests in females depending on their orientation. Some people just find, the female form and femininity to be like a beautiful, like really fascinating, interesting thing. I think what strikes me as really important is, are you being obsessed over females to the point that you can't get any sleep at all? Are you obsessed with females to the point that you like can't be in a room with a female because you like experience so much anxiety and so much stress that you have to leave the room? Are you obsessing over females to the point that maybe someone's gotten upset at some point in time and maybe they've called the police? Maybe they thought that you were following them or harassing them in some way. Short of those things, I would think that, thinking about females could be a perfectly fine thing to do. Could be a perfectly fine thing to do. Thanks for your thoughts, Mango. And if you have any other questions or anything else to add, please, by all means. Great stuff. We mentioned some superstitions, colors with special significance, and so on. And then the last category of obsessions that appears on the Y box is somatic obsessions. And so some people with their OCD, they have really, really intense fears of getting sick or of dying. There's some other experiences that manifest this way too. But a person with OCD and with somatic obsessions, they might get a headache. And I'd have to say that virtually everyone in life gets headache. I'm not aware of a single person I've ever met who has not had a headache at some point in time, either by virtue of stress or not sleeping enough, or maybe eating something weird, or having maybe some kind of jaw tension. And then, they get, the muscles here connect to the ones here, and then they get a headache. I think, when you have the experience of a headache, if you're obsessing about it to the point that you say oh, I've got this headache, I can't go to school because I think this is brain cancer. And then you go to the emergency room and you wait there all day, 8 hours to talk to a doctor, and the doctor takes your blood and says, either gives you some imaging, takes some radiology, or says, there's nothing medically concerning about this headache. I think you should feel reassured and go home, and you can follow up with a doctor in a month. If you were to continue to worry oh, this doctor, he didn't even do a brain scan. How does he know? He hasn't seen what's in my brain. And even if he did, how do you know the brain scan's accurate enough to pick up a little tiny thing that might be causing me brain cancer? If you were to obsess like that, that could be a sign of OCD. And then other parts, and this one gets tricky. So some folks with OCD, with somatic obsessions, might be really, really excessively concerned with a part of their body. I've had patients who were really, frankly, obsessed with their nose, her nose, the shape of it, that's too big, that needs some surgery. This could be confused with body dysmorphic disorder. And where this becomes a problem is if a person refuses to go out in public because they're afraid of someone being aghast at the appearance of what everyone else would say is a normal nose. This might be a person who goes to the plastic surgeon again and again and again, has, serial operations on their nose because it's never quite right. This might be a body dysmorphic type somatic obsession. Of course, other parts of the body can be involved too. But that pretty much covers the obsessions. I think I've got more from Mango here. Okay. I'm obsessed over the female, on how beautiful she is. I didn't mean to make them uncomfortable, but I did. I was actually recommended to watch this by someone you probably know. Her name is Kelsey Lioness. Yeah, I do know Kelsey Lioness. Strikes me as a great person. Of course, a beautiful person too. And so I'd have to say first, I think a lot of people who have watched Kelsey's channel have probably thought wow, this is a beautiful person. It's nice to see her. I think a lot of people can probably connect to that. I'm obsessed over the female, on how beautiful she is. I didn't mean to make them uncomfortable. Okay. I wonder, I would be curious, what happened exactly to have Kelsey feel uncomfortable. I'd wonder too, how would you know that Kelsey felt uncomfortable? Of course, sometimes people think that, oh, I made those people uncomfortable with something that I did. And sometimes it's not accurate at all. Sometimes it is accurate, I would think. I would wonder if Kelsey said something to you at any point in time that maybe she felt uncomfortable with something you did or said. Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I totally misunderstood you, Mango. You said, okay, I'm obsessed over the female, how beautiful she is. Okay, those are two separate thoughts. Sorry, that was my mistake. I probably spent way too much time saying what a fine-looking person Kelsey is. Okay. Yeah, you're saying Kelsey Linus is amazing. I'm going to thank her for recommending me to be here. So this has nothing to do with Kelsey, but it sounds like maybe there's some other female who you find beautiful, who you made uncomfortable. How do you know for certain that they felt uncomfortable? Did they say, "Hey, hey, Mango, you're talking about me, thinking about me, writing me, it's making me uncomfortable"? Was it like that? Or is this just something you think that maybe you're imagining that you're making them uncomfortable? I realize it could be like anywhere on like a really broad spectrum. And so I'm curious about it. I'll give you some chance to give you a chance to write if you're interested to. Talking about some compulsions now with OCD. Common compulsions are cleaning or washing. This might include hand washing. This might include showering, bathing, toothbrushing. It might other compulsions might be checking compulsions. This is like checking to make sure that the burners on the stove are off. Maybe checking them like dozens of times before you leave, despite the fact that you just checked them like 3 seconds ago. You check it again. That would be excessive. Checking the stove, checking appliances, checking that you like didn't hurt yourself, checking that you didn't maybe do something in the house that could possibly hurt someone else. I remember working with a patient who was really, really tied up, would spend I, in fact, would miss school sometimes because they were afraid that they had left like some kind of item near the top of the stairs or close enough to the top of the stairs that someone could trip over it and then fall down the stairs and die. And so this is a person who would compulsively like check to make sure, okay, is there anything within 15 feet, 20 feet of the stairs? Is everything picked up? Did I vacuum recently enough? And like, is there something like deep in the pile of the rug that could like trip someone or hurt someone? Is there like a little tack buried in there or a staple that someone could step on and they could like prick their toe and then they raise their toe to their foot up to their waist and they're like holding their toe and they're hopping on one leg. And then, my dad's going to fall down the stairs and die that way. I've had a patient who worried about that. Other people might have repeating rituals like rereading or rewriting. Other people might have counting compulsions like we talked about before. They might have ordering and rearranging compulsions. I definitely have dated someone who would rearrange the... I guess I couldn't say that they had a problem other than my being annoyed that I could never find where the glasses were. But they would like rearrange the kitchen like almost every week. Like things in the cabinets would be in completely different places that like didn't make any sense. It drove me crazy, but did not drive them crazy, and was not the reason why there was no breakup connected to that. So couldn't quite call it a disorder. Some people have hoarding and collecting compulsions, and then other people do other compulsions. Some people, this is one is super, super common. Some people might pick at their like cuticles like this, kind of like push back the skin, just kind of like do it all day long, especially when they're stressed out. Some people might like pull out hair, either on their head or their eyebrows or their eyelashes, or oftentimes someplace else on their face. Some people might, that's called trichotillomania, by the way, and it's really closely related to skin picking. It's really the same phenomenon. Some people will pick their skin, in fact, to the point that it bleeds and then it scabs, and then they get a scab and they pick at the scab too. This can be an OCD type compulsion as well. Okay, so that is the super dry symptom inventory. We're going to move back to the slides, and I wonder if I've got some new things in the chat. Okay, where'd my slides go? Where'd they go? Here we go. Good, good, good. Okay, so we went through the Y box. Okay, Mango's going to be right back. I wouldn't mind telling you the person who I'm obsessed with. I'll be right back because I'm going to eat. So Mango, I've got to say prognostically, this looks pretty good. So you're at least not disordered in terms of eating because you're able to, like stop writing and obsessing in order to eat. Granted, you might go eat and, think about the girl while you're doing it, but you're accomplishing some really important life functions while you're doing that thinking. So I feel encouraged. So here we go. I want to share a song that I've heard on the radio. To be honest, like on the radio, it struck me as like pretty graphic. And of course, I've worked with OCD patients. But as I was sitting there, like in the car, listening to the radio, the first few times I heard the song, I thought like, whoa, like this stuff is like really accurate. Like I believe that this artist, Girl in Red, who I think she's from Norway. I totally believed, as long as she had like written the song, that she was experiencing OCD. In fact, of course, I never evaluated her. I think I've only heard like one. I'm going to play the song with the lyrics visible. And here, let me make sure. So the lyrics will be over here to the right. I'll play the song now and then we'll talk about it.